again. This is Stephen Welsh, President of the International Chiropractors Association with the ICA Monthly Update for the month of October. Now, it's been over a month since the last ICA Weekly Update, and today will be the first of a monthly ICA COVID report. You see, as long as the COVID crisis continues, I will continue to bring you the latest information on why, as serious as the novel virus is for a small segment of our population, for most of you and your patients, there is no need for mass panic. After 3 months of daily updates and 2 months of weekly updates, it is now time to move to monthly reporting. Now, I'll continue to follow the format of an opening statement, followed by several news segments. Today, I will share with you the most recent data from the CDC, followed by some comments on an article just published in the American Chiropractor. And I will close with a report to all ICA members regarding the recent annual meeting and the election results. But first, my opening statement. Would you believe that it has been 6 months since the very first ICA COVID update was delivered on March 30th? Do you remember what the original objective was? At a time when there was absolutely no data, precautions were taken, assuming worst case projections, by the way, to simply flatten the curve and keep the hospital systems from being overrun. And what happened? Well, emergency hospitals were constructed and never used. Hospital ships were deployed and underutilized. The death toll skyrocketed for 1% of the population. But 6 months later, the death toll is effectively still at zero for over 30% of the population. Yet the debates continue. In the name of science. Well, that was then, but this is now. We now know so much more. The science is catching up. And so I'll ask the following questions. Why is there still so much controversy and divisiveness around the world, in the United States, even in the chiropractic profession, and the ICA? Well, I would suggest that the answer is quite simple. You see, all you have to do is to get clarity is to, you know the old saying, follow the money. See, as you listen to the various arguments being posited on both sides of any of these controversies, simply ask yourself, who has a financial benefit being associated with the position being articulated? In some cases, it may be an entire industry with significant profits at stake. In some cases, it may be an organization with competing economic interests. In some cases, it may be individuals who are profiting off the continued divisiveness. So all I ask is that you invest some time and look beyond the headlines. Get past the sound bites. Dig into the facts. Assess the players and simply follow the money. If you simply do that, the answers to many of these questions should become crystal clear. Well, that's my opening statement for this month. Coming up next is our first segment. We're going to take a look at the latest mortality data coming out of the CDC. All right, in this segment, we're going to take a look at the latest CDC mortality data. Now, the most impressive statistic is the number of daily tests that are being done. You see, the average daily rate is almost up to 1 million a day, or about 20 to 25% greater than a couple of months ago. And the number of new cases is now around 40,000. Which is actually about 40% lower than 2 months ago. And hospitalizations are down. And the daily deaths continue to decline. Now, if we look at the 4 key statistics side by side, comparing where we are now to where we were just 2 months ago, it's simply daily testing up 25%, daily cases down about 40%. Hospitalizations down about 50%, and the daily deaths are down about 35%. Now, these statistics seem to be a favorable trend. Let's hope that continues in that direction. Now, digging a little deeper into those statistics, one finds that over 40% of the deaths associated with COVID come from the 1% of the population in long-term care facilities. Now, looking at the mortality data by age group, it becomes apparent that there is essentially zero risk of dying from COVID for over 30% of the population that are under the age of 24. Now, finally, a look at the graph of weekly deaths from all causes continues to indicate that the second wave continues to decline, and we are almost, not quite, but we're almost back to normal. Now, these are just the facts. You can draw your own conclusions about what you're reading in the headlines. And remember, follow the money. Well, that's the COVID update for this month. Meanwhile, we will continue to track the data and continue to bring you the latest information as this pandemic seems to continue to wind down here in the United States. But before concluding this segment, there's some breaking news that many of you may find interesting. You see, from October 1st to the 4th, the American Institute for Economic Research hosted a remarkable meeting of top epidemiologists, economists, and journalists to discuss the global emergency created by the unprecedented use of state compulsion in the management of the COVID-19 pandemic. The result is the Great Barrington Declaration, which urges a new focused protection strategy. Now, here are a few excerpts from the video interview that was just released a couple of days ago.
Three prominent scientists for this past weekend have been meeting in a house in Massachusetts to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic more broadly. And they have come together to produce a declaration which sets out an alternative approach to how this virus should be tackled. They are Dr. Martin Kulldorff from Harvard, Dr. Sunetra Gupta from the University of Oxford, and Dr. Jay Bhattacharya from Stanford. I am delighted that the three of them join me now from Great Barrington, Massachusetts, where they've been meeting all weekend.
And this is nothing revolutionary, because this is things that people have been saying since the very beginning back in March, but it's often been dismissed. So we were thinking, coming together, three scientists from reasonably respectable universities to sign a declaration urging the world to look into a different approach might have a good effect.
Our intention of putting on the table an alternative strategy for dealing with the current crisis, which protects the vulnerable, but at the same time allows us to minimize the damage done, particularly to the young and the disadvantaged sectors of our population.
So it's less of a strategy than a recognition of a biological fact. But what I see is a scientific consensus among people who've looked at this very carefully. Now, of course, I understand there are people that disagree with us, but I think we can persuade them if they're looking at the same things we're looking at and thinking about the same models we're thinking about, and thinking about the policy and the collateral damage in the way that the evidence has become undeniable and hard to ignore. We've come to an agreement about what the science is telling us. This is a science-based approach, and it's aimed at minimizing the harm to the population at large. And I think that's the message we want to send. We care about cancer. We care about mental illness. We care about all these things. We are not simply just bags of germs infecting one another. We're human beings. And we want to take advantage of the new knowledge we've gained.
In any event, that we will be relying on a combination of vaccination and naturally acquired immunity to provide the level of protection we really want.
Many will get infected. The risk of mortality, the risk of death is very, very different across the ages. And it's not like it's twice as high risk. It's not that it's 5 times high risk. It's not that it's 10 times. It's not that it's 100 times. The difference risk between the oldest and the youngest is more than 1,000-fold in terms of mortality. So while everybody can get the disease, everybody can get infected, the risk of mortality is very, very different between the oldest and the youngest, and there's more than 1,000-fold difference in the risk. And that is, in a sense, a weakness of the pandemic. And if you have an enemy, which this pandemic is, we have to utilize that weakness to minimize the death and to minimize the collateral damage to our society and to everyone.
It's the responsibility to limit the damage is a communal responsibility, not simply an individual one. And the messaging has been an individual, if you do this, you do that, you're a good person, you're slowing the spread. I think that's a mistake from public health. It's not taking advantage of the weakness the virus actually has. This is the saner approach, the more moral approach, the more scientifically based approach.
So, I mean, I would be confident in saying that if we adopted this strategy, then maybe we could all have a very nice, normal Christmas.
Quite an interesting approach, wouldn't you say? You see, on October 4th, these very highly respected epidemiologists authored the document called the Great Barrington Declaration. And in it, they state the following, and I quote, "Fortunately, our understanding of the virus is growing. We know that vulnerability to death from COVID-19 is more than 1,000-fold higher in the old and infirm than the young. Indeed, for children, COVID-19 is less dangerous than many other harms, including influenza. Now, as immunity builds in the population, the risk of infection to all, including the vulnerable, falls. We know that all populations will eventually reach herd immunity. You know, the point at which the rate of new infections is stable and that this can be assisted by, but is not dependent upon, a vaccine. Our goal should therefore to be minimize mortality and social harm until we reach herd immunity." And what their recommendation is, well, quote, "The most compassionate approach that balances the risks and benefits of reaching herd immunity is to allow those who are at minimal risk of death to live their lives normally and to build up immunity to the virus through natural infection, while better protecting those who are at the highest risk. We call this focused protection." Well, there you have it. Now, as we have discussed at various times during the past 6 months, there's an ongoing debate among scientists regarding the potential of reaching herd immunity the natural way. I'd recommend taking a visit to that website. Watch the whole video. I think you'd be glad you did. Last month, I brought you up to date on the growing controversy between the ICA and certain academics and researchers that are criticizing the ICA in what I have been referring to as fake research. Shortly after last month's message, I was contacted by the editors of the American Chiropractor magazine and was asked to do an interview. The results were just published in the October issue, and I'm going to address some highlights from that interview. First, let's examine the history between the ICA and the World Federation of Chiropractic. What many do not realize is that the idea of creating the WFC actually came from the ICA over 30 years ago. Now, the interview also covered what has transpired since Berlin in March of 2019. Now, the reader is reminded that the ICA has always been a staunch supporter of the ideals and objectives of the WFC. And it continues to maintain that traditional chiropractic is evidence-based and that arguments to the contrary are based upon a false premise. Now, after reviewing the complaints and the counter-complaints, the readers are reminded of the importance of the principles of the ACC paradigm that were adopted by the WFC Assembly in 2001. Now, I concluded that interview with a call for greater unity and an optimism that the majority of chiropractors and their respective national associations can commit to developing a unity of purpose and commit to a level of cooperation and collaboration that's necessary to expand chiropractic worldwide. Now, I'm going to close this segment by repeating my message from last month, and I quote, "What is needed is more diversity in scientific thought, more inclusiveness, more tolerance, and more support in the international chiropractic community for chiropractic as it is legally defined in the United States and how it is practiced by so many throughout the world. It is time to stop the infighting in the ICA, in the United States, and around the world." Well, that's the update on the ICA WFC issues. The final segment will be directed to all ICA members. What a year it has been. Little did we know in January that all of our plans for an annual meeting in April would be turned upside down. It's been a year of challenges, but it has also been a year of opportunity, a year in which your association has met each and every challenge head on. Let's consider what has been accomplished. In an environment where countless meetings and conventions all around the country had been forced to cancel, The ICA adapted, embraced the technology, and continued to move forward. During the 125th year celebration of Founders Day, the ICA held its first virtual annual membership meeting. Members from around the world were able to see and meet the new ICA home office team. You know, the people behind the voices on the phones and the names on the emails. The meeting highlights included presentations from the FCLB and the WFC and the International Diversity Panel, led by ICA Vice President Dr. Selena Sigafus-Jackson. And the ICA also unveiled several new programs that will enable the ICA to serve you, our members, and our profession better in the future. I would like to thank all of you from all around the globe who took time out of your busy schedule to join us. And for those of you who are unable to attend the live event, I invite you to the ICA website to see the highlights of the meeting. Please take time to view the replay and learn about all that has been going on at the ICA to build a better and stronger organization in order to serve you, our valued members around the entire world. Now, 2020 will also be remembered for the historic election conducted electronically and held under the new ICA governance model. It was the first step in building a stronger and more diverse ICA board. The ICA is a truly international organization committed to meeting today's challenges while serving our members and fulfilling our mission to bring chiropractic worldwide. Well, that concludes my update for this month. Meanwhile, please check out the ICA COVID resource page where you can find links to that American chiropractor interview. And doctors, please share these messages with friends and colleagues. Meanwhile, please reach out and connect with the ICA. If you're an ICA member, thank you for your support. And if not, now is the time to join us as we protect and promote vitalistic subluxation-based chiropractic worldwide. We are here for you to help you help your patients, because through chiropractic, we are helping them lead a healthier life, and they do still need that reassurance that there's no need for mass panic. And don't forget, you are truly their beacon of hope. We will get through these challenging times, and we will do it by working together. Thank you.